Okay, we're live for another episode of Whiskey Wednesday with Master Blender Drew Mayville. How's it going, Drew? And Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year. Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah, so it looks like we have all the Sazerac Ryes, one of my favorites. So what are we talking about today?
So this is our straight rye lineup that we have here at the distillery. And to me, they're all brothers and sisters of each other. So if you really look at it, this first one, Sazerac Rye, is kind of the younger brother. And then you go all the way through to the 18-year-old, which is the older brother or sister. And then in between, you have that spicy, probably the one that causes trouble in the family. So what we want to talk about today is the personality of each of these. Even though they have the same parents, they all have a different personality. And that's what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, great.
So we'll talk about the mash bill first, because the mash bill in all three are the same. And what's the mash bill for a straight rye? I wish everybody could answer, but I guess they can't. So what I did today is print out the standard of identity of this product. So you can look that a straight rye whiskey, is produced at not exceeding 160 proof, so 80% alcohol coming off the still. And one of the reasons for that is that you're not eliminating all the flavor components, all those congeners that are coming off. Because if you went up to 190 proof, you would end up making vodka, so you're stripping a lot of the flavor away. So that thereby entrenches the taste of this particular whiskey. And also, not less than 51% rye. And so that's really important because that dictates the flavor profile. So majority has to be the rye grain. And then down here, you can't store in a barrel more than 125 proof. And that's got to be a charred new oak container. So this is a rye whiskey definition by the TTB, which is our regulatory body here at the distillery.
And so it sounds like, Drew, there's a lot of similarities between rye whiskey and bourbon, except for the main component, which is
so
rye.
A bourbon is more at least 51% corn or 51% wheat, whereas a straight rye is 51% rye. Mm-hmm. So that's where you get all that spiciness, all that flavorful tanginess from a straight rye. But that definition was just a rye whiskey definition. A straight rye has the added sub-category that basically says that it has to be at least 2 years, and you can't include mixtures or rye whiskey. Straight rye whiskey can't include other rye whiskeys from other states, so it has to be from the same state. So that's getting very specific. So a straight rye is very particular. Nothing can be added other than water. So it's very, very particular. And so that's why I want to start off with the definition so you understood what you're tasting first.
That's great. And, first comment here, Mandy Olson on Facebook just says, "Yay, I just snagged a bottle of Thomas Handy and I'm excited to see how Drew tastes it." So that was our first comment of the day from Mandy Olson.
That's fantastic, Mandy. We're going to have a good taste. I hope yours is, maybe it's a new one. I don't know what one this one is. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, if you look at other rye whiskeys around the world, for instance, Canada has a definition of rye whiskey, and technically and legally, they do not have to have rye in it, even though they can call it a rye whiskey in their standard of identity. So just to be informed that ours is very particular for the United States, and it's very strict. And I thought at the same time, while we're talking about rye whiskey, I'd show you what rye actually looks like. I don't know if you can see that, but a lot of people don't know where rye comes from, and there's an example of that, a grass, and it produces the seeds for the rye whiskey. And I brought actually today some show and tell of showing you what rye actually looks like when it comes into the distillery. I hope you can see that.
Yep, you can.
And you can see it's not soft, it's dry. And that's going to be ground up, and that's at least 51% that goes into the mixture in making it. So Very, very interesting. And so when we taste, like last time, I want to describe that we nose very gently, like that. Just gently bring your nose to the glass, and we inhale through both nostrils, maybe one at a time, it's up to you, and you can turn the glass. And you keep your mouth open slightly so that it resonates through the nasal passages. Because sometimes one side is a little more sensitive than the other, and you can smell different things. And then when we taste, we like to roll it around the palate and listen to the story that the whiskey or the straight rye is telling you. Because there's a beginning to the taste, there's a middle, and then there's an end. And technically they call that a finish on the end, but that's just like a story, beginning, middle, and end. So specifically, we'll start off with our Sazerac Rye. And actually...
No, go ahead. I was just saying it's a great place to start. That's
right.
what I was thinking.
Actually, this bottle, I was actually here when we designed the bottle and we put the product in. So that goes back a few years now. And so you can see this replica bottle. This is the way the bottles used to look. And a lot of people comment how neat this bottle looks. It looks kind of retro. But actually it was made, and bottles like this existed in the 1800s. But Sazerac Rye really symbolizes the culture and the history of New Orleans, the Big Easy. Farmers and distillers barreled and shipped it down the Mississippi to New Orleans. And that spirit, when it got to New Orleans, really fueled that whiskey culture in New Orleans and started really the first American cocktail, which is called the Sazerac, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And that Sazerac cocktail was born in the French Quarter in a coffee house, which was basically a saloon or a bar. And they used to call them, I guess it was kind of a good name for it, a coffee house. And the original Sazerac was absinthe and bitters and French brandy, actually. And so we'll talk more about the Sazerac when we talk about these others with Thomas Handy, because he actually helped invent it. And so let's just start tasting the Sazerac Rye, since we know a little bit about the story. And so probably a few of you have Sazerac Rye in front of you. And when we nose it, the first thing I get is like a Christmas spice. It reminds me of Christmas when I nose this a lot, because you get those spices like cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, clove. And again, this is the younger sibling of these. Some people pick up a dill note, like a dill pickle type note. And you get that vanilla. And you get that little bit of that spiciness, that pepperiness. And then when we taste it, the first thing at the beginning of the story, you get the fruit. You get a candied, maybe even an orange type note. Maybe some people see a little bit of an apple. But then as it transitions, you get more of that spicy black pepper, maybe a touch of cinnamon again. But you see, as it transmits across the palate, it has many different characters. I don't know, do you get that?
A.J. Anderson says, the story it's telling me is putting me in my happy place. That's the story it's telling me.
I like your descriptor.
Yeah.
But you get anise, you get honey, you get that spiciness, you get that dark fruit, very, that black pepper spiciness, very lively on the finish. And then as it passes after a few minutes, you still get that candied sweetness in the middle of your palate. What a beautiful drink to drink straight, or even in a cocktail itself. I have to have another sip of this one.
And as you're doing that, Drew, I'm looking through some questions here. We do have a lot of questions. And one of them is Is there any water added to the mingling process? Nick Perry asks.
Nick!
Is there any water added to the mingling process?
Nick, when you say water, let me see. It is reduced to 90 proof because it comes out of the barrel higher. Is that what he's talking about?
Must be.
Yeah,
And
Nick.
Probably from being a smaller small batches, we're mingling barrels. You have to have water. You have to add water
Yes.
to Sazerac Rye. So,
But when we'll add water, and this is something a lot of people don't realize, we'll add water. We won't reduce it to the proof, the barrel or the label proof right away. We adjust a little bit higher, and then we chill filter this, and then we'll finalize the proof after that. So that's the way we add water to almost proof, chill filter, and then we reduce it to the exact 90 proof at that.
yep, I think that covers it. And he also asked, how long does that mingling the blends for, say, a BTAC Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, which is the Sazerac 18, how long does that usually take? Does it sit in the tanks for a while after you blend them or mingle them?
Yeah, so for those, it's a little different.
Okay.
We do wait a little longer because it takes a little longer to marry. And originally, we used to do it at least a couple weeks.
Okay.
And it varies depending on which one. The uncut, unfiltered were always longer.
Great.
Good questions, Nick.
Yeah, those are great.
No
Keep
more
them
for
coming.
you.
Keep them coming. So what's next, Drew?
Okay, so Thomas Handy is actually named after a bartender who was first using rye whiskey in the Sazerac cocktail. And he was actually born in Maryland around the 1830s. And during the 1800s, when coffee houses or these saloons lined the streets of New Orleans, a young man named Anton Peychaud began serving cocktails that he made with a secret family recipe for bitters. And that recipe became famous, and actually it was named the Sazerac cocktail after the Sazerac house on Royal Street. And that was originally, like I said before, made with brandy. And then in 1847, Thomas Handy arrived in New Orleans, and he actually became an expert barman making Sazeracs at the coffee house. And he eventually bought the coffee house and partnered with Peychaud, who was his friend. And then around the 1870s, he altered the recipe of the Sazerac by replacing it with brandy, from brandy to Sazerac Rye, or American rye whiskey. And people really loved the taste difference. As you can well imagine, a brandy being much sweeter and more fruity, aromatic, whereas the rye was really spicy and the peppery and, with all those clove notes. And it still had that candied fruit citrus note too. So that's how the Sazerac came into being from brandy, because the brandy they used was the Sazerac de Forge brandy. That's why, another reason they called it the Sazerac House. So a little bit of the history before we actually start tasting. They probably have a million questions, right?
Well, there's quite a few coming through, and I'll wait till after you taste Thomas Handy for these.
So the Thomas Handy is not, the water's not added to Nick's point. This is uncut, unfiltered, or straight from the barrel. So we select these barrels that go into making this once a year. And so this is part of our antique collection. Actually, these two, the last two, are part of our antique collection of the 5. The Sazerac is at 90 proof, whereas this is uncut, unfiltered at barrel or found strength. So let's taste this one because the taste is really much more intense. So this is the child that's really got I don't know if it's a temper or really wild, robust, flavorful in terms of what whiskey is like.
Yeah, and this one's at 126.9 proof.
Right. So same recipe. So we're varying, not the recipe here, we're varying the proof, the age, and the location. So right away, for me, I get that burnt type sugar, fruit. You get a nuttiness like a hazelnut. And for me personally, I get more of that orange zest flavor on the nose compared to, say, Sazerac Rye. Yeah, that's really powerful. You can really smell it through your nasal passages because of the higher proof. I wish you could all smell it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the Sazerac Rye, it really is intense fruitiness up front, but it explodes on my palate because of the proof, because we didn't filter anything away from this because it was straight from the barrel. So all those flavors, those congeners, fatty acids and esters, are popping on my tongue right now, and it's really quite smooth up front. But you do get that cinnamon, that creme brulee type taste. Initially, you even get a silkiness to it. You get that candied fruit, you get fig, really a beautiful whiskey. And then as you get that allspice type finish in terms of cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, and really a nice long and warming finish. So it actually warms, as you swallowed it down your throat. It's not burning, it's warming. So it's really quite soothing on the taste or on the palate.
And talk about, on the nose. Adam Burke says, talk about aromatherapy. I can sit and smell this all day. So it sounds like he enjoys a good Sazerac Rye or Thomas Handy.
Well, if you're lucky to have the opportunity to taste it, you're gonna have an experience that you can't get with too many other whiskeys. It's absolutely fabulous for a straight rye. Like I said, same recipe as Sazerac Rye, but the intensity and the complexity seem to be amped up like 10 times with the Thomas Handy.
Mac Evans asks a question that I think there's others probably thinking is, what is chill filtering? You mentioned that Thomas Handy is not filtered. And as we move on, he does ask, what is chill filtering? You had mentioned it a couple times. Yeah,
the chill filtration process is used probably for only one reason, is to eliminate the possibility there's any flock in terms of, in other words, sedimentation. So if we took Sazerac Rye and we never chill filtered it, basically this would be cloudy. So all the fatty acids, esters, all that would be in solution. It would be cloudy. So people would probably not want to buy it, even though it would taste great. They wouldn't buy it because of that flock. And so what we do is we chill. The industry normally chills filters. So you chill it down, probably slightly below freezing, and then you filter it. So when you do that, when you chill it, the fatty acids and esters actually come out of solution when you filter it. If you didn't do the chilling, it wouldn't come out of solution. It still wouldn't be stable at room temperature. So if you took a Thomas Handy and actually put some water in it or some ice or both, you would probably see a little haziness develop over time because the fatty acids and esters come out of solution, so it starts to show sediment and cloudiness. Now the beauty is that when it's not filtered, because when you filter anything, I don't care what it is, you're taking flavor away. And so that's the beauty of the uncut unfiltered, is that you actually get the most intense flavor. And well, people ask me a lot of times why this isn't cloudy, because we don't chill filter it. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because the alcohol, the ethanol, keep the fatty acids and esters dissolved. But when you add water to this or ice, they come out of solution because it's not soluble, those fatty acids and esters, in water. Mm-hmm. It's quite simple if you think of it that way.
Yeah, so the higher the proof,
yes,
and you don't chill filter it, you run
there's a risk.
Yeah.
And then people wouldn't buy it if it's cloudy on the shelf, most people.
Right.
But it would be better in flavor because there's more intense flavor still there.
So some cosmetic reasons there.
Yes.
But again, higher the proof, you may not have to do that. Because
right.
of that.
So we don't do it. And everybody asks, what's the proof? What is the magic number? And there's no magic number because each product is slightly different. So the beauty of not filtering is the fatty acids and esters that are there. They stick to your tongue and your palate, so it lingers a lot longer. So you hear a lot of experts talk about that lingering. Oh, it lingers forever. That's because those fatty acids and esters aren't filtered out. So it's very long, the finish.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great answer, Drew. Thanks for diving in deep on that one. Because we have a few of those questions about chill filtering and, you know, the purpose of it and everything. So I think you covered that great. Yeah, let's move on.
Okay. So like I said, Thomas Handy is part of our antique collection. So we have 2 straight ryes in the antique collection. And the other one is the Sazerac 18, the big brother or big sister of this group. And it's totally a different product because of the aging process. So these are younger products, and this is 18 as it's described there on the label, 18 years. And Sazerac 18 goes back to the original 3 that were part of the antique collection in 2000. So this is not something that's been around for 100 years. It's only since year 2000 that Sazerac 18 was invented. So 20 years old now, 21 years old. And again, only 3. We had the Weller 19, the Sazerac 18, and the Eagle Rare 17. Then Thomas Handy was added to the antique collection actually when a couple years after I started here in 2006. So that was 6 years later after this one was introduced. And then actually, as a side note, George T. Stagg was added in 2003. So just a little history on Sazerac Rye there, the 18-year-old. So being the same mash bill now, we're aging at 18 years, we're not going to age it the same place as these others in our warehouses. So if we age this in the top floors of some of our warm warehouses, it certainly wouldn't taste like this. It would taste like the inside of a barrel. So it's really important where we select these barrels or put them in the first place, because too much heat will cause this not to be a good product. As a matter of fact, when I first came to Buffalo Trace, we took some Sazerac 18 out and we actually tanked it such that it wouldn't age too much and be a bad product. So we wanted the best product.
Maybe explain tanked it. That doesn't mean you got rid of it. That means you put it in a tank.
No, I took it home. No,
yeah,
I'm just kidding. No, actually, tanked it means that you would take it out of barrels, because it's not going to get better in barrels where it was situated. And we put it in a stainless steel tank. And then just to keep a constant flow of product, we release some each year. And so that's what tanked it means.
Yeah, great. And that really answers, looks like Brian Mackey on Facebook. He does ask, he says, excited to watch this one, really interested to hear the differences, especially more subtle ones such as warehouse location and how the distiller and blender taster decides which is which. So I think you did answer Brian's question.
Yeah, that's critical. His question's brilliant because it's really important with selection. But even before selection, it goes into where they're located and placed to begin with. So you always have to go back upstream, because you don't want to put this in a warehouse where it's hot. You want it to develop gracefully over time. And that's what we look at when we do Sazerac 18. People think, oh, you can make more of this tomorrow, but it's not possible. Like, you have to wait 18 years. And unfortunately, that's a long time.
Is that true for most of the older whiskeys here? Is 18 years? We have several that are older, that it's usually in a cooler environment?
It has to be.
Yeah.
And what we're doing, without going into, maybe it's a future of a new webcast, is what we're doing to try to lengthen the time it stays in the cask. There's tricks that we've learned over the years on how to do that. And
great.
Very exciting for me anyways.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
So just by aging 18, you're going to get more complexity as compared to these. And that's because of that slow maturation process in the barrel of 18 years. Right away, you get a candied apple type nose. Honey, you get some apricot notes. You get that gentle rye spice. It's not so lively as you would get with Thomas Handy. Very gentle, very different. It's modified that spiciness, so it's more subtle. And of course, you get oak flavors coming through. And I would say a touch of that mint, that you get that refreshing smell of mint that you get on the nose. And I hate to taste this one because I like it so much. I'll probably want to have another taste afterwards.
Gotta save me some, Drew.
Wow. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I really apologize if you don't have this one to taste.
Well, one nice thing, you go to your favorite bar.
Yes, your
Get a
favorite
pour,
bar would have it.
Try it out.
You definitely, you get chocolate notes. You get that old leather, and that's because of that aging process. It's actually not subtle. It's actually very strong. You get that richness and complexity. You get cherry notes. You get, and especially on the mouthfeel, which is something that's quite different, is that buttery, creamy texture because of that aging process. And again, that gentle warming comes through from the spiciness, but much richer than the previous two. Coffee, black pepper, cherries, and then especially on the finish, because it is 18, you get a dryness, the oak flavors come through. But it's not overpowering, it's quite balanced nicely. So again, this is the older brother or sister of these two that really shows off, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. You know, we've got a lot of questions, and a lot of really interesting ones that I haven't seen before, and a lot of it's mostly production, so we won't dive in too much. But you know, Justin asks, does the bourbon evaporate as much when it's tanked? And we know that, you know, being in a stainless steel tank versus a barrel is very different. So
I would say it's quite a bit different. It doesn't necessarily evaporate unless there's small passages it can get through. It would be minimal, but most what happens is oxidation. Mm-hmm. So there's always reactions because all the components are together that happen that can actually change the taste. So even when we did tank it, that's a good question. Mm-hmm. People would say, and before it was even public that we did do that, people would see differences than they did the previous year. Mm-hmm. And that's because of that process of oxidation. It actually changes slightly over time. As a matter of fact, when we have our standards that have sat around for a while, you can see it changing over time slightly. Maybe not to everybody, but for us, we can see that slight degradation. As a matter of fact, we change our standards for lots of different products every year or less. So we see that oxidation happening. And to me, it becomes sweeter. It becomes more, I call it glassy, but sweeter. Mm-hmm.
So no matter what vessel it's in, whether it's stainless steel or a barrel, you're going to see some difference, even if it's minimal, depending on where it's at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The thing is, I would never recommend in glass or stainless steel. I would recommend drinking it.
There you go. And you know what's funny, Drew? We've had several questions about, I think folks are realizing how much you really love rye whiskey.
I like them all.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments about that. So our time is up.
Oh, already?
Yeah, we're nearing 30 minutes with you, Drew. Wow. I know you've got a tight schedule.
Yeah.
Any closing statements? Anything you'd like to end with?
Cheers.
That's perfect. That's perfect. So yeah, thanks again everyone for tuning in for Whiskey Wednesday. We'll be back next Wednesday, 2:00, and the rest of the year. So we'll see you live Wednesday, 2:00.
See you.